Welcome to Soul Talks. I'm Bevan Bird, and I'm here with Sal Rachele today. Very excited and honored to have you with me. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, you're welcome. And Soul Talks is a show for spirit-led entrepreneurs and others who are called to take part in creating the more beautiful world that we all know is possible. Together, we can create heaven on earth here and now. And I'm just really glad that you're able to join us today, Sal.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So I'm going to introduce you first so that we can start getting to know you better. You have a fascinating story. So Sal Rachele is a pioneer in the human development field with over 40 years experience in personal growth, spiritual practice, and mind dynamics. He has written 6 books, including Life on the Cutting Edge, Earth Changes and Beyond, Earth Awakens, Prophecy 2017 to 2030, Soul Integration, The Real History of the Earth, and his newest book, coming soon, The Mystery of Time. Working with several groups of spirit guides, he has collaboratively developed innovative healing modalities, including timeline healing. Sal has been guided to help souls heal their past, parallel, and future timelines through a cosmic reframing process involving the merging of the conscious self with the God presence. And Sal conducts workshops and seminars in over 20 countries worldwide, including certification training courses in timeline healing, soul integration events, and various intensives on related subjects. And he's also the co-creator of the Sananda Mystery School, a 3-year course in spiritual development coordinated with the Ascended Master, Lord Sananda. And you can get more information on Sal and his work at his website, salrachele.com. So Sal, first, I just want to ask you, where in the world are you right now?
Well, at the moment, I'm in Los Angeles, of all places.
Where were you just most recently?
I was in Bali. My first trip to Bali, it was a combination of business and pleasure, if you want to think of it that way. The first week, we did lots of touring of the Hindu temples and sacred sites. And the second week, I conducted a timeline healing training and a weekend workshop and saw a lot of people privately.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. That's great. I love to go to Bali.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place.
And you're going to do your first workshop or event in Vancouver, right?
Yeah, this is going to be the first time to Vancouver. I've seen Vancouver from across the Sound there a few times in the past when I've been in northern Washington State, but I've never actually been to the city of Vancouver.
Gala Marino is hosting that event, and she and I connected through Facebook, and her events are called Orenda events. And when she told me about Orenda, I was like, what does that mean? And I think it's a person's ability of their will to change the world. And that's kind of what we're talking about today, right?
Okay, well, I didn't know that either about that word.
And so your soul integration work and book is very popular around the world. What does soul integration mean, and why is it so important now?
Well, soul integration is based on what I call the 6 lower bodies. It's a model of our lower self. Now, some would say the lower self doesn't really exist. It's an illusion, but let's say that it's an illusion. We still want to understand the illusion while we're seemingly caught in it. So when I say lower bodies, I'm basically referring to that which we can typically see, taste, smell, touch, etc. What's often commonly referred to as the ego and the subconscious mind and various other aspects which we all know and call our human self. So the soul is, you could say, it's a higher level of who we are that's beyond the human self. And so in order to access the soul, in order to understand the soul, in order to have a direct experience of the soul while we are in a human body, it's necessary to align the 6 lower bodies. And I'm going to explain what they are. The physical, emotional, and mental, we already know that those ones pretty well. It's the astral, etheric, and causal levels that are not so well understood. We have subtle healing techniques such as acupressure, acupuncture, work with the meridians, the chakras, the aura. These are all aspects of the subtle bodies that are, just a moment.
Including craniosacral therapy?
Yes, absolutely. And various, Jin Shinjo, acupressure, and Reiki, reconnection. This is my kitty. We'll make it a little bit informal here and introduce the kitty as well. So
Beautiful cat.
Yes, he's very beautiful. He wants to be in my lap when I speak. So hopefully that won't distract any viewers.
Well, I think it'll just increase, uplift the vibration.
I could say I'm channeling him, but that would be a little bit hokey, I guess. So back to the subject. The astral, etheric, and causal bodies are often just lumped into one thing called the subtle bodies in many teachings. I separate out the astral and etheric. The astral is more kind of like a parallel dimension to the physical. It has an upper, middle, and lower part, and you could say the middle part is roughly equal to the physical dimensions in terms of vibration, level of consciousness, and so on. And then the etheric is above the astral. It is a higher dimension than the physical. And in my teachings, I talk a lot about the etheric crystal light body, which is kind of our next phase of evolution as humanity, that we're going to evolve into this more ethereal state where the aura, the chakras, the electromagnetic energy patterns, the grid of the body, the meridians, and so on, acupressure points, tapping points, all of that will become much more tangible and real as we ascend into this etheric level of who we are. Now, there's a concept here that's a little bit difficult to explain, but I want to just touch on it, and that's the idea of activation. Activation is a way of infusing our consciousness into a particular level or dimension, and then essentially it pops into existence for us because it's been there all along, but our consciousness has been preoccupied with everyday matters of being a human being on Earth. All the religions talk about attachment to materiality being a problem, and the problem is that the lower dimensions are very seductive. They're very hypnotic. They mesmerize. They allure us in, and so when we're having a human experience, it's very difficult to remember that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. It seems to eclipse our memory, our knowledge, our awareness of the higher realms. So soul integration is about lining up these lower levels of self so that they are all working together in harmony. It's a lot like opening the shackles of a combination padlock. Imagine it has 6 chambers instead of the standard 3 that a combination lock normally has. And you have to align all 6 of these chambers before you can pull the shackle out, unlock the lock. Yeah. So it's kind of like that. You line these 6 lower bodies, then the energy of soul or higher self or spirit, which are not all the same, but they're close enough for now, all that energy can come down into the lower realms, infuse the lower realms, activate all of the levels, including the astral, etheric, and causal. Therefore, we are aligned. We have direct communication with our soul, which is the lowest part of our higher self. That's all explained in the books. The Soul Integration book is probably the best source for really understanding this. It's not easy to understand because our language is geared toward the lower levels, and we don't really have any adequate explanation in our earthly languages for the higher levels of being. We actually have 6 higher levels, which collectively I refer to as the higher self. The soul is the lowest of those 6 higher levels. So we have the 6 lower bodies and the 6 higher bodies, if you want to think of it that way.
Okay. And so a quick question, just these levels, those other levels like etheric, for example, those are at a higher frequency, right?
They are, exactly.
Okay. And also it sounds like you're talking about people taking back their freedom too. The activation, removing shackles is your freedom, right?
Yeah, because we don't have free will on planet Earth, most of us. We have imprisoned will. Our wills are imprisoned by negative belief systems, negative emotions, programming, conditioning, the way we've been brought up, what we've been taught to believe, and so on. And only a small percentage, well, about 1 in 4 human beings, is even on a path of self-improvement, of self-discovery. 3 out of 4 people are just kind of going on automatic pilot, you know, reciting what they've been taught in school or by the church or the parents or the state. And very few are actual free thinkers, which is what I call level 4 consciousness. Level 3 consciousness is the realm of conformity. It's like the sheep mentality, the herd mentality. Well, this is the way my parents did it and the way their parents did it, you know, so on. And level 4 is the realm of free thinkers. And then level 5 is the realm of true unity and oneness, which is very different than level 3 conformity. Although the people who are stuck in level 4 can't tell the difference. You know, they accuse the higher teachers of being communists and socialists and wanting to homogenize everyone and so on. And that's not true. It's very different than conformity to a belief system. And it doesn't matter what belief system it is. You know, anything that ends in an ism is essentially a collective belief system, whether it's atheism, communism, socialism, capitalism, consumerism.
Makes sense.
Many other isms.
Oh yeah, very interesting. So what is it more like up there in, was it level 6?
Well, level 6 is the causal body.
So I meant level 5 then.
Yeah, actually level 4 is the astral, level 5 is the etheric, and level 6 is the causal.
Oh, right. Sorry, I was not clear in the question then. I mean about the this consciousness level or thinking level.
Well, okay, the mental body is level 3. That's the level of intellectual reasoning, analytical thought. The more intuitive levels are kind of like in the astral, etheric, and causal.
Okay.
Those are where we simply feel the truth rather than having to logically or rationally, analytically think the truth.
Oh yeah.
We can all do that. We can all say, okay, this is how it is. In fact, these levels are really for the mental body, that there's to give the mind something to grasp onto, so that it's not just floating around wondering what's happening. So, you know, when you go up to a really high level in the universe, they're not talking about levels. They're not thinking I'm at a certain level of vibration. That's for our little conscious mind to have an understanding of all this. It's not how it works in the greater universe.
Okay, that's great. I'm glad we went there. Thank you.
Yeah.
So what I was getting at, I just wanted to talk about it more, basically, like the thing about oneness or unity, right? Everyone winning, everyone being free, that kind of thing. Could you tell us more about that? I think that was...
Yeah, that's the soul integration state. That's the state when you... And it's a little bit hard with the levels because there's a 6 level and a 4 level model of this. You know, the 6 lower bodies that correspond to what many Eastern philosophies call the 4 lower worlds. These are the realms of duality, of right or wrong, good or bad, light or dark. And we get stuck in these realms of duality, and we get stuck on a certain viewpoint of reality. And people say you get stuck in the head. Well, that's another way of saying really that we're caught up in the ideas and concepts. And this is the realm of individual thought. It's a higher state than the conformity because it's about letting go of the belief systems and learning to think for ourselves. So it's a step forward. But we can get stuck there and not see that separation is an illusion. There is no such thing. Even science is proving this now with the non-locality principle of quantum physics, basically saying that everything correlates to everything else if you take it far enough.
Yeah, the connected universe.
We're all connected, and you could even go further than that and say that this is a giant hologram that we're living in, that it's a projection not of a flat surface like a normal hologram, but of a single point, the point that existed before the Big Bang, if you want to think of it that way. So I don't want to go too deep into the physics of this, but basically there is no inner or outer. Those are ideas, again, for the conscious mind. The idea that, oh, something in here is me and something out there is the world or the universe. Those are concepts. They're not reality. There's one undivided reality, and that's the level 5 consciousness. Or you could say it's the soul consciousness level 7 in the other system I'm using. So whether it's level 5 or level 7 isn't important. What's important is that we recognize that there is one being expressing in many forms.
Yeah, very good. In Neville Goddard's work, he talks about how, like, in the Bible, every single lesson there is not stories of historical fact. Each one is like psychological things about our mind, different aspects of our mind, and basically we can create things. So it's like we're aware, we can be aware of something, but then we think it's separate from us, but then we must go to the next level and realize we are that, right? And how does
there's some of that in the book of Revelation. That a lot of that is symbolic of higher states of consciousness, or going beyond the lower states into the upper states, you know, and so that has a lot to do with that. Pardon the noise in the background.
Okay, you have an important message. Like, for example, I'll quote you, I think. You are a powerful, creative, spiritual being, capable of creating in the image and likeness of your creator. And I'll make a few more points too. We are not victims. We're not helpless to change the world. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We create the world as we are. We must be the change we want to see in the world. So please share your important message of what we can all do and why it's important.
Well, first of all, some of those quotes are not from me. Some of them are, we are powerful, creative, spiritual beings. That's kind of a mantra for me, because we need to get that. It's a true statement, but most of us don't believe it. And as you know, beliefs are very powerful. If you believe that you're separate from God, then you will have an experience of being separate from God, even though it doesn't make it real. It's still a realm of illusions. So some of those statements are simply going beyond illusions and stating corollaries to the idea that there's one being expressing in many forms. If we are all one, then obviously we are the ones we've been waiting for, because the idea that we're waiting for some guru or savior to come and lift us out of our delusions and illusions, that's still believing in separation. That's still believing that something outside of us is responsible for our happiness and well-being. And that's probably the central core, it's the core corollary of the belief in separation. The idea that we need to defend this little self from all kinds of perceived threats. And of course, you see what that looks like in the world with all the armaments and militaries and all that. Or we need to elect somebody to save us, you know, believing that some president or prime minister or king or emperor is somehow going to save us, or that some guru from India or anywhere else is going to somehow do that as well.
And also for entrepreneurs too, right? Or people wanting to become entrepreneurs. And like myself, we can, like you said, we may not be free, right? We may be limited by our beliefs. So I struggle with that myself, right?
Yeah, and again, sometimes we have to overcome the religious programming too. There's a happy balance between, on the one hand, people that are hopelessly caught up in materialism and consumerism, believing that the latest iPhone is going to bring them happiness, And the other extreme, which is being in the monastery, in the convent, in the temple, and believing that you have to deny yourself the pleasures of this world in order to get to heaven or something like that. Those are the two extremes. And there's a happy place in between those extremes where we can enjoy the fruits of this world, but not become attached to them.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, that sounds good.
And you know, a lot of people talk about that, but how many people are actually doing that, are actually living that truth, that we can be in the world but not of the world? That's what Jesus taught, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And what does that really mean, being in the world but not of the world? It means partaking, participating, being present for people, you know, playing along perhaps with some things that we don't really believe in, if it's going to provide more harmony and cooperation. For example, maybe we pay taxes, you know, and we don't do it because we feel obligated to some outer entity called government. Maybe we disagree with that outer entity, but we still may be guided to, you know, obey a traffic signal. So it creates harmony and balance and reduces accidents if you obey the laws of the road. It's common sense type of thing. That's being in the world. But we don't identify with that. We don't say that's who I am. We don't say I am a teacher or a counselor or a healer or a therapist or a homemaker or whatever. We don't identify with the role we're playing in life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Very good. How can anyone create?
Well, we are all creative. That's one of the universal truths. Now, some of us are using our creativity to experience something called powerlessness or helplessness. Because we're so powerful, we can believe we are powerless, and then we'll have an experience of being powerless. That's how powerful our beliefs are. It doesn't mean that we truly are powerless. It just means we're having an experience of being powerless, especially if we were brought up in a family where either it was rigid, controlled, dogma, belief systems, whatever, or you know, the family was struggling financially, or they were under an oppressive government, or whatever it was. You know, there's various, you know, negatives we all get growing up. Sometimes they're more subtle, other times they're more obvious. Maybe our parents fought and argued a lot when we were growing up, so we got the belief that, you know, relationships are full of struggle and strife, and, you know, whatever it is, we all got some of it. And so we have to disidentify with that. We have to detach from that and say, wait a minute, that's not who I am. That's not who I am. And that's the first step, really, is to break the sense of identifying with the little human self with all its problems, difficulties, and so on. And realize that there's a higher being that's, in a way, orchestrating all of this, if you want to think of it that way, that there's a divine will that supersedes the little will of humanity. And it doesn't mean giving up control to some capricious God up in the sky with a long beard, all of that nonsense. It means that there are universal laws that we can choose to align with, just like we align with the law of gravity. You know, in one of my books, I talk about, what about the young man who jumps off a building, breaks his body, and then blames God for his misfortune? Like, God is punishing me. He caused me to break my body. No, you simply chose not to align with one of the laws in this world called gravity, you know. Yeah. And I use the sun as my analogy of God. The sun doesn't care if you're a sinner or a saint. It shines equally on everyone. Why? Because that's what it does. It's the sun. So there's an aspect of God that's like that. It doesn't care if you're a sinner or a saint. It loves you unconditionally, even if the most vile behavior imaginable has come out of you. It doesn't mean there aren't consequences for bad behavior, but it means who you are is still a powerful, creative, spiritual being, even if you're a murderer, rapist, terrorist, whatever. And of course, we're not condoning those bad behaviors, and some people probably need to be locked up, but they're still beautiful, creative, powerful, spiritual beings.
Mm-hmm. It's a common sense thing, right? The locking up.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And but you love them. You don't condemn them emotionally or mentally or spiritually. You love them, recognizing that there are consequences for bad behavior. It doesn't mean you let some terrorist run through your town blowing everything up. That, that's not acceptable behavior.
If we don't love them, then we're putting a label on them which they wouldn't want to put on themselves, and so it bounces back and we put it on ourselves.
Well, basically, if we send hatred, what are we reinforcing? We're reinforcing hate. So if we hate terrorists and we're sending negative thoughts to presidents we don't approve of and things like that, then we're just perpetuating the problem. We're magnifying the problem. Regardless of who's in the White House or the Kremlin or anywhere else, we need to send love and compassion to those souls so that they will do a better job. They will do a better job if they're being loved than if they're being hated.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't mean we approve of their policies. It doesn't mean we approve of their personality. They might be, a total jerk from a personality point of view, but we still need to love them.
Are there more steps to creating? I think you shared two.
Well, there are. First of all, we need to disidentify with the lower self or human ego and identify with the higher self, or you could call it human spirit. So we need to move our priorities. Our first priority is establishing contact with our higher self, our true being. And then we need to eliminate distractions. That's another big one. So many distractions in life. That's the whole purpose for temples and monasteries and ashrams, is to eliminate distractions. People go sit in the ashram at the feet of the guru for 10 years and they're not out in the marketplace worrying about paying their bills and so on and so forth. So they've eliminated a lot of distractions by being in that environment. However, that's not enough. That's not being in the world. That's being out of the world and not of the world, instead of being in the world and not of the world. So most of us, that's not our path in life, to be in the monastery. For some it is, but some of us, we did that in past lives anyway. We're finished with that, and now we're here to bring heaven to earth rather than to escape into a little false heaven called an ashram or monastery. So, and I'm not putting down ashrams and monasteries. They serve their purpose at a certain point in our spiritual progress. But most of us are not in that place now. We're into doing something in the world to help bring about a new age of peace and prosperity. That's not going to happen by wishing it into being or saying a few affirmations, putting a couple stickers on our mirror. Those might be helpful, but they're very minor adjustments to our reality. We have to go deeper into the self. That's why we have techniques like timeline healing, which is one of the things that I'm offering in different places. So this is to go. It's like psychotherapy, only it goes deeper. It's like past life regression, only it goes deeper. And we'll be doing some trainings in different parts of the world this year, and so I'm kind of jumping through a lot of hoops here. But basically eliminating distractions is where we were before I went off on a little tangent. So, things like turning the television off, eliminating the media's constant barrage of fear. You should be afraid of this, you should be afraid of that, and big daddy government's going to come and save you, or the church is going to save you, or Jesus is going to save you, or something's going to save you. We need to, those are distractions. That doesn't serve us in waking up to who we really are. Jesus was misinterpreted, basically. He did say that these things are within you as well. And it did say, seek ye first the kingdom of heaven and all things shall be added. Well, that's a good, powerful statement, because it means put your priorities, get your priorities straight. First priority is establishing a connection with God and with higher self, recognizing who we really are. And then all things shall be added means that whatever you need in order to complete your purpose and mission will be given to you by higher self. Doesn't mean you sit around waiting for it to drop in your lap. You might have to move your feet. You might have to start a business or do something, But if the guidance is coming from the higher realms rather than from the lower human ego, then it'll be good guidance. It'll move you in the right direction. So, of course, the next question is, how do you tell the difference between ego and spirit.
Oh yeah, it's a great question.
Spirit is giving, it's radiating, it's creating, and it creates from all of the centers, not just the mind. It creates from the heart and solar plexus as well. It's the movement of living from the inside out, going out this way. Mm-hmm. And when you're coming from spirit, you genuinely want people to wake up. You genuinely want to give to people. You want people's lives to get better. And you're asking yourself, how can I serve today? What can I do to make the world a better place? How can I be more effective as an enlightened human being? That's spirit. Ego is feeling inadequate, feeling like it's lacking, and it needs something from outside of itself in order to feel complete. Now, obviously, ego is necessary in this world. If I decide that I'm not ready to become a breatharian and that I require food and drink, then I'm going to acquire that food and drink somewhere out in the world, or it's going to come to me, or someone's going to bring it to me, or whatever. That's ego, because it's saying I need something from the world, whether it's food, clothing, shelter, whatever, human contact. So it's necessary to have ego, but the idea is to not identify with it, to just say, okay, there's my little human self with its little human needs, and I'm going to go ahead and participate in that because I'm in the world, so I will acquire food or drink or shelter or whatever this little body needs. Mm-hmm. But that's not who I am. This is who I am. The big self is who I am. And this little self is like a tiny bubble suspended within the bigger self. So now I'm identified with the bigger self, and I have this little human self with its various needs, wants, desires.
It's like those little pets, you know, they used to have these little things and
Right.
I forget what it's called, but that's like your Yoshi pet or because we have all those different levels.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So it's a matter of where we put our priorities, and what keeps us stuck in the lower is all the distractions.
Oh yeah, this was great. I learned a lot there. Thank you for answering the how we can create question.
Exactly. And so we were getting back to distractions. We mentioned the television, the media, the pop culture, which is a huge distraction. The telephone can be a big distraction. The internet can be a distraction, depending on what we do with it. Almost anything can be a distraction. Shopping, sex, money, I mean, you name it. They can all become distractions. We can become overly concerned with making money, for example, and you see a lot of that in the Western world. I'm temporarily here in the kind of the heart of that. You know, Hollywood is within walking distance of where I am. You know, that kind of stuff. So it's the artificial reality we've created, and then we get attached to.
Oh yeah, fascinating. What kind of world do you want to create?
Well, obviously, I want to create one where people are waking up and taking responsibility for who they really are. And, you know, that doesn't mean obligating ourselves to various charities and help groups. It means becoming a charity or help group in our own right, regardless of what organizations we join and that sort of thing. I'm looking forward to a world where we develop new energy sources. They're not really new, they've been around forever, but they're new to us as humanity because we've been addicted to fossil fuels and so on. Not so much consciously addicted, unless you're the oil company executive or something, but going along with it, you know, just pulling up to the pump, putting fuel in the car and so on, because we just think that's the way it has to be. Now it's like more and more people are waking up, despite appearances. Sometimes it doesn't look that way, but people are really starting to question everything. I'm speaking, of course, to the mass consciousness, not those of us who've been questioning for 20, 30, 40 years. So the world I want to see basically has clean, renewable energy, abundance for all. This whole ridiculous idea of separation, you know, culturally, ethnically, oh, those people are different from us, they're evil, you know, all that kind of stuff. That goes away. Which doesn't mean we throw common sense away. Like the immigration in Europe, there's a balance needed there between letting everybody in and just running chaos in the streets because we've let millions of people in without screening them. That's one extreme. The other extreme is hating anybody who's not like yourself. That means we hate immigrants, we hate Muslims, we hate Jews, we hate Christians, whoever it is. That's the other extreme. So somewhere in the middle, again, is a happy place. We don't just let everybody, including the jihadists, into the country to do whatever they want, to impose their Sharia law on people who don't want Sharia law. That's an extreme. No, we have to have some kind of boundaries in life on the human level. We need to set boundaries. If you're going to come in and try and impose your religion on us, that's not acceptable. That's bad behavior. And I'm not anti-Muslim. I'm not anti-anything, really. But it's common sense, once again. So we need a world where there's tolerance, there's love, there's compassion, there's recognition that we're all one. And we need to set common sense boundaries so that, not having boundaries is like having an expensive home with expensive things on it and a big banner out front that says, come on in, help yourself to anything you see, including me. That's how much sense it makes to not have boundaries.
Yeah.
So obviously we need to have a personal space as long as we're in these human bodies, with the human egos and all that. So that's common sense living in this world. Stop at a red light, go at a green light. I mean, that's common sense. Those are boundaries. But people go to the other extreme and they let people in who don't really want to integrate. They want to take over in some cases. So you bring immigrants into Europe, you make them learn the language if they want to live there. You tell them they have to be tolerant of other religious viewpoints if they want to live there. If they want to build a mosque with their own money in a corner of the city that doesn't bother anybody, fine. Give them a place to worship. Great. But if they want to, start being anti-Christian and burning, Christian churches, no, they're not welcome. So a tolerant world, but not a world without boundaries or personal space,
Okay, great. Values are very important. I think we as humanity need to clarify our values. So I proposed a few values, and I'd love to hear what you think should be some highest values. So humanity. See, I started looking at the artificial intelligence and maybe at artificial super intelligence. The things you talked about, Orion and some stuff. Sure. So I looked at that and I was a little concerned a couple of times lately. Okay, so humanity, alignment with our highest self or the divine, and joy, and well-being, and abundance, and collaboration. So those are some values I've put there.
Well, let me comment on artificial intelligence for a moment, because the idea of machines is that they're here to serve us, to make repetitive tasks either more enjoyable or less necessary. And we're not here to serve machines. And when people rely too much on artificial intelligence and the mechanization of society, then there's a problem. And the whole economic system is a problem, in my humble opinion, because it's not based on true spiritual values. And we have people like this Bezos, the Amazon guy, who wants to automate everything because he wants to make more money, not because he cares about humanity. And there's a lot of people like that. I'm picking on him because he's a real obvious example. But you want machines to do the repetitive menial tasks, but you also want to train people to do creative, pleasurable, meaningful things in life.
Yes.
There's enough work for every human being on this planet. I mean, just get every human being to plant one tree and see what happens. There's plenty of work for everybody, meaningful work. Give the repetitive tasks to robots. I'm fine with that. I am not anti-technology. But when it comes to thinking and creating and being artistic, that's not in the realm of machines. That's in the realm of the human spirit. So We need to put machines in their proper place. They are humble servants of humanity, doing the things that become distractions to our spiritual progress. Like
So if
hours
machines,
cleaning the house. I mean, that could be a meditation. You could turn cleaning the house into a meditation, but if there's a robot that can do it, why not?
yes. Okay, I totally agree with you. So I'll ask you this: if there are machines that are given the ability to kill and the ability to make that decision, which I've heard they've done, is that right or wrong?
Well, from a human point of view, it's obviously wrong. And there's a group from Orion that wants to create kind of, you see all these movies of X-Men and so on and so forth. And there's some spiritual value in some of the movies, but a lot of it is more the Orion philosophy. It's like, let's glorify machines. Let's make a robot cute and cuddly, you know, so that people will love the robot. Well, okay, fine. But what are we really doing there? We're giving our power away to some machines. Just like we give our power away to an economic system, which is almost the exact opposite of higher spiritual values. You know, we need to recognize where we're giving our power.
Yeah, well, I believe trading stocks, commodities, any kind of these things, I think the trading doesn't add real value to the world.
No, not if it's speculation. I mean, even Bitcoin. I mean, how is Bitcoin helping the world? It's making a few people rich off speculation. But does it have any real value? And in its present form, it pretty much doesn't have any real value. It could be converted into something that represents units of work or something like that. But right now, it's pure speculation. And if the people who do make money on it end up putting the money into good causes for humanity, then there's been some good there. But you know, half the jobs in the world have revolve around counting money, saving it, spending it, investing it, insuring it, spending it, of course, that's the big one. Half the jobs in the world have to do with managing money. And money is only a tool to make the trading of goods and services more convenient. That's its only purpose. And yet we tie our self-worth in with it. We think we're a failure if we don't have enough of it, or we think that we're better than somebody if we have lots of it. We've given our power to a little piece of paper with presidents' faces and numbers on it.
Yeah.
You know, so that's an example of giving our power away.
Okay, so then about the values, what do you think are the highest values that we as humanity?
Well, love and compassion should be at the top of the list. You know, unconditional love. Everybody knows what that word means. It's one of the easiest words to define. Love without conditions. You love somebody no matter what. It is an easy word to define and understand. Is it easy to put into practice? No. It's very difficult for most of us to love unconditionally, because we have this belief that, well, my happiness depends on my husband or wife or my son or daughter being healthy or getting good grades in school or whatever, you know, and therefore my happiness depends on that. That's not unconditional love. You know, how is the parent going to feel if the child comes home with failure on his report card, or gets into trouble with the law or whatever? And then most of the time the love tends to go down because it's not unconditional. So we have to learn how to love unconditionally. That's number one. Love and compassion are natural attributes of unconditional love. We naturally feel compassion for people. We care about people if we're in unconditional love. We do whatever we can to help them.
You were saying it can be difficult or it can be complicated, but it sure feels good when your heart opens, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's not going to open if we're a slave to our belief systems, if we're a slave to consumerism, if our life consists of working all week long to earn money so we can spend it on things we don't need at the shopping mall on weekends. It's called a hamster cage. It's a rat race.
Totally. Yeah.
So we have to examine our isms because they take us away from unconditional love and compassion and caring and service.
Okay. Okay, so I guess that's the answer.
Mm-hmm.
That is awesome. I've been talking about caring about each other. It's very important. Yes.
Absolutely. That's, you know, because we are each other, you know, there is no separation. It looks like this body ends here, that body begins there. It looks like there's separation, but it's an illusion. Just as this solid table here is not really solid. It's a bunch of vibrating molecules and atoms, you know. It's not really solid. And so we need to use the new science and the new age thought, metaphysics. We need to marry those two, basically, and use common sense, put common sense in there as well. And that's, I think, going to be the right approach for changing the world.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. So in your workshop coming up, the Soul Integration Workshop in Vancouver in March, it says that people will be given tools and techniques for restoring their power and integrating the many facets of their soul.
Yes, and one of those tools is, of course, meditation, which is nothing new. It's not a big sensational thing, but effective meditation can be a powerful tool, and we're going to have meditations in the workshop where we actually do some of the healing work, where we do the aligning of the levels of the soul, because, you know, we need how-tos. It's fine for me to say all this, and then somebody says, well, you know, I'm arguing with my wife, my bills aren't paid, children are on drugs, you know, how is that relevant to my life? So we need to have something practical for people to use every day in their life. And yes, a certain amount of it does involve commitment. You know, you don't have to have an hour a day to meditate. 20 minutes a day might be good enough. But you know, you can get audio recordings of many of these meditations. Plus, you can record the workshop, and so you can use the techniques that we will be sharing in the workshop in our everyday lives, you know, put it into practice, in other words.
You believe in integration and being holistic. Like I know you said, it's good to learn multiple healing modalities and so on. So,
Yes.
So what's something different about your workshop than other workshops of its type?
Well, you know, I guess I should quote my students, because that's the you know, testimonials, I guess, whatever. Basically, people, number one, it puts a lot of the pieces of the puzzle together. I have a lot of people who come to me and say, well, I've read a lot of books, I've been to a lot of workshops, and I've never been able to really put it all together until I came to your events. I seem to be one of these puzzle piece characters, I guess, that helps people put the pieces of the puzzle together so they can see the big picture as well as the little picture. And so I think that's one of the main advantages of this work, is that it kind of does put a lot of the missing pieces of the puzzle together. You don't just get the abstract metaphysics. You know, The Secret is a good kindergarten primer for the fact that our thoughts influence our perception of reality. Now, notice I didn't say our thoughts create reality. I said our consciousness. Actually, the way that I've qualified that statement is the quality of your consciousness determines your experience of reality. That's the most accurate metaphysical statement I can come up with. The quality of your consciousness determines your experience of reality. It doesn't necessarily determine reality itself, because number one, we have what we call a collective consciousness. And if 90% of the consciousness believes in war, poverty, misery, and suffering, and 10% believe in peace and prosperity, there's still going to be some war, poverty, misery, and suffering on the planet until the consciousness raises to a certain threshold. At that point, you have something similar to the 100th monkey theory that takes place, where it goes viral throughout the humanity, new ideas for bettering our lives. And you see that. I mean, you know, many years ago it was what's it called, USA for Africa or something like that. They had that song with all the celebrities, "We Are the World."
Yeah.
You know, things like that. And then there's later ones. I can't think of them right offhand, but there's been a number of things that have gone viral in a matter of days. Millions of people have been exposed to higher ideas. People like Eckhart Tolle on the Oprah Winfrey Show. I mean, that was an example back in the day when I thought, wow, here are some advanced metaphysical ideas going out to millions of people who normally aren't exposed to this sort of thing. So it is happening. We are making a transition into a more enlightened society, but it's a rough road. It's a very rough path right now because belief systems are clashing. People's comfort zone is getting pulled out from under them. Their comfort rug is getting pulled out. The recent elections in the United States were an example of that. We have this extreme polarity between the so-called Democrats and Republicans, although if you go to a higher level, you see they're two sides of the same coin. But, you know, a lot of people don't like to hear that. I mean, they say, yeah, it's a lesser of two evils kind of thing, you know. Well, okay, but it's still evils, right?
And there's people who want Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, and maybe Bernie Sanders would be better for a lot of people. But again, there's a reason we get these characters in office. And, you know, they are a reflection of something in our own consciousness that we need to heal. Whether it's
absolutely.
Whether it's the Democrats, you know, letting terrorists into the country, or whether it's the Republicans hating the poor people. You know, I'm generalizing. I realize there's some Republicans that care about poor people and some Democrats that don't want to let terrorists into the country. You know, so it's like, but they're extremes. They're both extremes, but there's two sides of the same coin, which is the belief in separation. That somehow we need big daddy government to save us, whether it's a Democrat, a Republican, an independent. And yes, Bernie Sanders is probably a little more compassionate than Clinton and Trump, but you know, there's lots of reasons he didn't get into office.
Okay, so I guess I'll ask you about timeline healing. Can you tell us, like, maybe briefly about your work with timeline healing? And yes. Is that going to be in the soul integration workshop?
There'll be a little bit of it in the soul integration workshop. Probably what we'll end up doing, since we have a kind of a minimum maximum range on attendance at timeline healing, is we will get people who come to soul integration who want a timeline healing training to say, I want it, I'm going to sign up for it, and then we get to a certain minimum number of people, I come back and do a timeline healing training. There's also a maximum, and sometimes we reach the maximum on timeline healing, depending on where we are. So if you come to soul integration and you decide you want timeline healing, then you need to say something right away while there's still room in a class. So getting on to timeline healing, it is based on the idea that we live in both linear and nonlinear time simultaneously. Now, what does that mean? That's a lot of big words. Nonlinear time is the idea that all time exists in the eternal now moment, this moment. The past, the present, and the future are contained in the now. This is not a new idea. There's been many teachers who brought forth this idea. I call it non-locality principle of quantum physics with respect to time rather than with respect to space. We know that time and space are intertwined. So non-locality in space means everything's connected no matter how far apart particles seem to be. They're connected. We're saying it's the same with time. The past, the present, and the future are all connected. Therefore, we have selves in our past that experienced trauma. We can go back to those selves and give them a healing by traveling back in time mentally, if you want to think of it that way, mentally projecting back into time. It's not the same as remembering. This is different, and we'll go into that in the training, what the differences are. It's also not reframing, where you pretend you had a happy childhood and you convince your subconscious mind you had a happy childhood, so your subconscious mind starts behaving differently. That's a psychological technique. It has value, but it's not really that great because you're still in denial. In timeline healing, you're not in denial about your problems from childhood or past lives, because we also go into past lives.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's not about denial. It's about knowing that that self can be healed because it's connected to the present and future. It's not some separate entity that happened a long time ago and there's nothing we can do about it. That's the fallacy. That's correct information. That quantum physics is now physically proving these things which are still kind of in the realm of, oh yeah, this is pretty out there stuff. You know? No, we have mainstream scientists now who are moving in this direction of being able to prove this stuff.
This is very important work. It's awesome.
So it's a little bit like psychotherapy. You do go back into the past, but you don't re-experience the trauma. You are an observer traveling through time and then doing healing on that which you're observing. That's kind of the dry abstract definition of timeline healing.
So it sounds like you're guiding people to heal themselves.
Yes, exactly. It's meditations, deep meditations where healing takes place, and there's various healing techniques involved within the structure of the process itself. The results, I have had several people come to me and say that in 1 or 2 timeline healing sessions, they have had more progress than years of weekly psychotherapy. So I'm not saying psychotherapy doesn't have its place. It certainly does. This technique is oftentimes far more powerful and effective and quick than psychotherapy. What causes healing? Love. So one of the main focuses of the training is that we get people to love the self that they were when they experienced trauma. So, like I said, I do trainings in different parts of the world, sometimes in English, sometimes with translation into different languages. Right now it's pretty big in Russia and Eastern Europe, a few other places. I'll probably do a training in Vancouver if things go well with the soul integration events.
Okay.
You can find out more in the new book when it comes out, which won't be probably till the end of January. Or you can just read Soul Integration and get some basic foundational work, which is helpful if you're going to attend the workshop in Vancouver. If you read the book, you get a little bit more out of it than if you haven't read the book. But if you haven't read the book, it's okay too. You still get a lot out of the workshop. It's not just a rehash of what's in the book either. Every workshop is new and different, even though the topic is the same.
And so it's like unique and custom for the people who are there, right?
Yeah. Every time that I've taught the workshop, it's been different because there's different people, different energy, different cultures sometimes. And so my guides and I tune in to who's there, and we say, okay, what exactly do these people need? And then, of course, my guidance and I make that decision what's best for the people there. And I work with various beings, including a set of beings called the Founders, which helped me write some of the books.
Oh, I'd love to talk with you for hours, right? Do more interviews, right? And then we could dig into different things, because I know there's a lot to unpack.
Right. You know, the whole spirit guides, that's a whole nother area. The Arcturians, my spirit guides, helped me develop timeline healing. So it's like, yeah, we're all one big happy family in the higher realms. So my spirit guides work together. They coordinate things.
I'd love to hear about, since I'm big on collaboration, love to hear about how it feels to collaborate with the Arcturians. Yeah,
well, they used to come to me a lot when I lived in California in the 80s and early 90s, before I moved to Arizona. And they used to come to me as bright blue-white beings of light, and for a long time I didn't know what they wanted. And then one day I was out in the desert in Arizona, and I was able to hear what they said, and they basically said, we want to work with you, we want to work through you. So I started channeling them, and they brought me timeline healing, among other things. And the founders came shortly after that. They helped me write the second and third books, especially, and to some extent the fourth book, which is Soul Integration.
And the new book, we have to mention the title as well, because if people are watching the recording of this in the future, then they can get the book right away as well. So it's The Mystery of Time. The
Mystery of Time. And I've got a few more diagrams to integrate in and put it in the index and all that. So I should have the manuscript finished. I do my own publishing in English, and other people publish in other languages. So probably by the end of January, it'll be available, and it'll be available as a PDF and maybe some other formats as well as a hard copy book, because people still do like hard copy books.
Mm-hmm. From your website, I can see that you're very prolific, and there's recordings of many workshops on there as well, right?
Yeah, there are, and there's also a series of meditations that are similar to the format that we use in the trainings.
Mm-hmm. I'm also curious about like what you're excited about these days.
Well, I'm excited about finding out more about the nature of time, because I'm learning along with my spirit guides are still learning at their level of consciousness, but especially we as humanity are learning about these higher ideas. So I'm excited about the work with time, also free energy. We say free energy, it's energy from the etheric realms that we can learn to bring into the physical realms without disturbing the balance of the cosmos. So my next book after this one will probably be on free energy or 0 point energy. There's different forms. So that's something also to get excited about. Imagine that in 20 years, we may have transport systems that can take you around anywhere in the world in 3 hours. That cost very little. And imagine what that'll do for agricultural distribution, and food won't rot as easily because it can go wherever it's needed in a matter of hours. And homes with little generators attached that provide all the heating, cooling appliances you need for pennies per month. You know, these are some of this is the future of technology on Earth. That nobody has to go hungry, nobody has to be without, because and plus the environment will be cleaned up because we won't be using fossil fuels or nuclear anymore.
Oh yeah, that's exciting.
But we have to change our consciousness before we can have these things. They're heavily dependent on our state of consciousness. Because if everybody believes in scarcity and technology comes out that promises abundance for everybody, do you see the problem there?
Yeah, we have to believe in abundance. That was the truth, and the scarcity was a lie, like a limited belief.
Exactly. So, you know, the law of creative thought, if your consciousness is in the toilet, how can you expect to have a beautiful, magnificent life? So we have to start by changing our consciousness. Every teacher has said that it starts by changing our consciousness.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And also, how goes the writing on transcending duality?
Well, transcending duality is a workshop, and I offer it in various places. It's woven into my books. There isn't a separate book called Transcending Duality. It's a workshop. Okay,
excellent. Are there any questions that you wish that I would ask you?
Well, you've done a pretty good job of asking the basic questions. You know, some of the questions we go into in great depth in the workshops, like why is there war, poverty, misery, and suffering in this world? Why does it seem to be so difficult to overcome our negative belief systems? Why does it seem that there's a so-called power elite that control the economic system, etc.? I mean, these are various questions that we go into. I don't have time to answer them now, but you know, they are answered in soul integration work. We have this idea of original cause, you know, like what is the deepest layer of negativity within us that has to be healed, which we talk about as well.
Okay, so then we'll give people the gifts that we talked about, like, you know, like when I arranged with people, like the organizers, like for example, that you have numerous articles and channeled messages on your website. So I'm going to give people the links for those, and that also you're generously giving our listeners and viewers a book, which is one of your first books, Life on the Cutting Edge, and that they just have to send an email to get that. So we'll have a link for that, and also the event in March in Vancouver, that the gala has a promotion with that, where 1 in 10 of everyone who signs up for the early bird gets a gift. There's a 1 in 10 chance.
I do want to urge people to sign up in advance. First of all, you get an early bird discount, and secondly, it helps us create a better workshop if we know in advance how many people are coming and this sort of thing. So it's, and you might get locked out if there's only so much space in the buildings where we're going to be, and so it's one of those things where you go within, listen to your higher guidance. Is this right for me? And things have a way of working out when something's right for you. You've heard all the stories, well, I don't have the time, I don't have the money, whatever it is. And then all of a sudden the time and the money are there because you really asked for it and your higher self came through for you. There's lots of stories like that. So if you really feel called to be a part of this work, do not let seeming obstacles get in the way. That's your mind trying to keep you stuck, basically. Well, it's not thinking like that. Oh, yeah, I want to keep her stuck. No. But that's kind of the result.
Yes.
Who was it that said, if you keep doing things the way you've been doing them, you'll always get what you've always got? Or
absolutely, yeah. If you want to get what you haven't got before, you'll have to do something different.
Right. It's like Einstein says, the problem doesn't solve on the level where it was created. You have to rise above the problem to see the solution. So if you're one of those listeners that says, gosh, this sounds great, I'd love to attend it, but, there's time or money commitments or whatever, that you are a powerful, creative, spiritual being. You have the ability to make this a part of your life if it's what you truly desire. There's a way to make it work.
Awesome. Thank you, Sal. Thank you so much for your time today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been great.
Thanks. And do you have any last words of wisdom or a message for our viewers today?
Well, to those who have become discouraged because they've worked on themselves for maybe 10 or 15 years or more, and they don't seem like they've gotten clear, know that, faith does have its place. If you keep working on yourself, you will break free of many of the problems you've been experiencing. Don't get discouraged and give up hope. It took me about 20 years before I really started to feel deeply the truths that I already knew mentally. And my life, of course, gradually became more and more reflective of higher thoughts and beliefs. But I've been on this path for 40 years. So if you've been on this path for 10 years and you're discouraged, well, you'll probably do it faster than I did because that's how it works. Each generation comes in and does it faster. So maybe it'll take you 15 or 20 years to get clear of a lot of your negativity. But isn't it worth it?
Thank you.
Look back on your lives and see where you've made progress already.
Look how far you've come.
Exactly. Because we let our egos get in there and discourage us, and You know, sometimes you just have to tell the ego, be quiet.
All right. Thank you so much, Sal, for the wisdom, the encouragement there, and all the inspiration.
Well, thank you again.